All right, well, hello and welcome back again. So glad you made it through the first class, and I'm here to help you move on to the next one. In this video, we're going to step into CSS and go a little bit further into its intricacies. We're going to talk about selectors and properties. We're going to talk about the cascade. We're going to deal with a CSS reset, so we know what that is right off the bat. We're going to talk about a couple specialty properties like float and clear, along with a whole handful of other ones. We're going to talk a little bit about study habits, as usual. So stick around and let's learn some stuff. Today I'm going to be following exactly with week 1, chapter 1, prep for next week. I'll be walking through this one by one, talking a little bit about things, and probably doing some demonstrations just to clear up the concepts and make sure that you have a good grasp on CSS and its properties. Alright, so CSS, again, is the language that tells the browser how to render some content. So on this page, we have content that's coming through, and the HTML is telling the browser that this is the content you need to render. It needs to say, learn about CSS to prepare for next week. However, the developers of this page are applying CSS to tell the browser how to render it. So it knows that this is a bold title and that this is regular content. CSS is just there to style, which does make it quite powerful. P is our selector. It says that find every paragraph and apply this property, the color, and then gives it the value, blue. So every paragraph is going to have blue colored font. And we're going to go ahead and open up our last project. And just in here, I'm going to add in a p tag, and we'll say, hello, I am blue. So this is, again, is the content that the browser is supposed to render, and in our style sheet, which again is already linked, you see that it says style sheet, it says ./css/style.css. This says, go to the top of the project, it finds the folder CSS, it opens it up, and then the slash here says go find a file that says style.css, and it finds style.css. So in here we're going to call a p, or every paragraph, and then we're going to say color blue. Finish that off, save it. Let's go ahead and go live. All right, and you see, hello, I'm blue, and then there's some links here that are also blue. However, you can change that with CSS. So there's a couple different ways to add in CSS to your HTML. There's a couple ways, and then there's the right way to apply CSS to your HTML. I say the right way because eventually you're going to be building pretty big projects, and you don't want conflicts, and you don't want unmaintainable code that is so big, so verbose, so lengthy that it's really hard for you to conceptualize and then have a grasp on it to fix. So there's a couple different ways. The best way, notice, the best practice is to use an external file. We've already done that in class, so you set up the path that goes to your CSS file. This is hands down the best way to do it, because this way actually you could create multiple files inside your head here. So you could do another link to a different style sheet, and another style sheet, and another style sheet if you needed. So you could compartmentalize all of your code. The other way is to create a style tag. So style tags look just like this. They look just like any other semantic element. However, they just indicate what CSS to apply. This is okay for testing, or if you have like a really special case, you could do that, but I wouldn't suggest it on a regular basis. And then the last resort is inline styling. So let's say you have this section, you type in style, and then you give it some properties and some values, and it will apply this to it. This section is going to be 500 pixels wide, 256 pixels high, and the background is going to be CCC, which is hexadecimal. I can't remember what that is, so let's go ahead and apply that. So we'll copy that. Let's go back over to our Visual Studio Code, and instead of blue here, we can actually we can pass it this hexadecimal, and it looks like it's going to be gray. Save that, and then yeah, so you can see up here that it's turned gray. This is something that you should probably look up is what is hexadecimal and how to use it. Go to Chrome and search Chrome extensions and look for color picker. It's going to add this little color wheel here, and when you click on it, it'll give you this little crosshair. And you can go over any element in the page and get the color. Unfortunately, we're just looking at white, so let's go to Slack. I can do the same thing. I can say I want this color, and then I can copy it. And in here, paste it and save it. And then we'll see up here that this is turned this plum color. So hexadecimals are really nice. They get very specific, but you're going to need a color picker or something equivalent to being able to use them. The 5 types of selectors that we have available to us in CSS are by type, which is like A tag, we put an A. P tag, for paragraphs, we put a P. Section, we put section. Another way is for an ID. An ID is rather specific, it's really strong, and it has the most specificity. Classes are what we usually use. Attributes, saying that like something's disabled or something is active. Those are rarely used, but just know that it's still available to you. And then pseudo classes. Pseudo classes are really powerful. They allow you to do something like on hover, so when your mouse hovers over something, something else could happen. So like we could put a flash here and say when we hover over this, it flashes, or it changes colors or whatever. So just know those are 5 different ways of selecting something. So in here, I'm just going to go ahead and clear out a number of these things as I don't need them for this this section. So we're just going to delete that out. For now, I'm going to write out a div, and in it, I'm going to say this is a blue div, and in it, I'm going to give it an ID, and let's say that ID is blue. In my CSS, we're going to call that ID using #, and remember our ID was blue, and then we're going to say the background is blue, and we need to give it a height, so let's say 100 pixels, and let's make our width 100 pixels, and we do need to close that off, save it, and pop, we have a square that is blue. Okay, let's go back to our HTML, and let's change this to blue ID, save, and we're going to make another div. In that, we're going to say class equals, and then we're going to give it a name. Let's go ahead and say red. Again, this could be anything. You can name it anything you want, as long as it refers to something in your CSS style sheet. So we're going to say this is a red class. Save that, and if we look at our web page, we'll see that we have a div that says red, and here we're going to call class name with a dot, and we're going to say red, and we're going to say border red, and we'll give it height 100 pixels and width 100 pixels. And let's save that, and we don't see anything. Oh, I know what it is. Okay, so in the border, you have to give it more than just one value. So border takes, whether it's solid, dashed, there's a couple other ones that you'd have to look up, and then the width of it. So here I'm going to say it's 1 pic, and save that, and voila, there it goes. So you could change this as well, so you could say this is dashed, save that, and you'll see a dash box, and then here, let's just go 5 pics, this is going to be really wide, boom, so there we go. So we could also condense this, so let's use our type selector and say all divs should be height 100 pixels and their width should be 100 pixels. And that's because we've repeated ourselves here. See, we have 100 pics, 100 pics, 100 pics, 100 pics. This is not good practice, so Just going to go ahead and delete that. And save it. And we still have the same thing. See? Go up here, refresh it, and it's the same thing. So it says that all divs should be 100 pix and 100 pix wide. And anything with a blue, although when you use this, there should only be one ID to any page. There can be multiple classes. This is allowed. So if we go back to our HTML and we copy this and paste it, we're allowed to do that because classes are allowed to be used over and over again. Okay, so use those, and this one we're going to say green to use our pseudo selector. So if we go back to styles and then we say dot green, we're going to say border green. Can't spell green. We're going to say solid, and we're going to say 2 pixels. And now we have a green square. But if we say green hover, we could say background green. Save that. And when we go back over, we hover over, and it turns green. Okay, so these are the 3 main ones that you need to know. I do suggest you learn the other ones, but for right now, these 3 are key. And along with that, I would suggest playing with the CSS code pens here. Something to be mindful of is specificity. This little chart is pretty nice in that it lays out specificity, and that's the way the browser applies the rules of CSS. So if you say type selector, for instance, H1, that is not very specific. But if you had 2 H1s and you said one has a class name like example, that one would take whatever rules you apply to example in the CSS style sheet, and the other H1 would be unaffected. Same thing for ID. ID is the most specific. That's why you're only allowed to have 1 ID per page. And that's not to say like you can't have ID example 1, ID example 2. Those are allowed, but you should only have 1 element with a specific ID name. It's kind of used in choice circumstances. So we also have combinators. I will dive into these just a little bit, just so you can get started with them. Mainly I want to talk about this caret. It's kind of the easiest one to get into. So let's go to our HTML, and let's say in this div, we're going to have another div. No, we're going to have an H6. We're going to say this is our white title. And in our CSS, we go to our page first, we can see this is our white title in here. But in here, if we say div and then say H6, we could say color white. Save that, and then it turns to white up here because we accessed the div that it was in, and then we dropped down inside of it and said we want this this thing right here. Next up is CSS reset. CSS reset is a really powerful tool, and just about every single website uses it. So you should kind of you should wrap your mind around it and just understand that it selects all of these: HTML, body, div, spans, applets, objects, all of these elements that are available to us on HTML, and says that they have 0 margin, 0 padding, border, font size is 100%, and aligns everything vertically. So what we're going to do here is we're going to copy this. Yes, I'm going to allow you to copy. And we're going to go back over to our file and say we need to create a new file in here. This is your shortcut of the day. If you're using Atom, you can just type in A. That is for Windows or Mac. It will go ahead and open up a new file. Shift A goes ahead and opens up a folder. While we're in VS Code, we're just going to go ahead and use these little icons. The left one is file, the right one is folder. I want to create a new file, and we're going to call this reset.css. And in here, I'm going to paste it. Okay, go ahead and save that. And now let's go back to our HTML. and right here, right here, after we've brought in our style right here, we're going to type out the same thing. So we're going to link it, give it relevancy, saying that it is a style sheet, and then we're going to give it a hypertext reference and say, remember, dot to go back up to the top of the directory, slash to go find something, CSS, the thing that you want to go find, a folder, another slash to say reset.css. Then close out your carets. Let's make sure we got this and save it. Alright, so I was trying to do one of those cool gotchas and make all of our styling disappear over here. However, I looked at our reset.css and there's nothing in here that says anything different than what our style says. See, we're just talking about colors here and adding some borders and stuff like that. So let's go into our reset and say something like height 0 pixels and width 0 pixels. Now, if we save that, all of a sudden, all of our stuff is crunched together and we can't see anything. Okay, reason for this is cascading, one of the topics we were going to cover. In our HTML, the way the browser reads this is that it goes line by line, left to right. This is very important to understand that the last rule that was parsed is the rule that will be applied. So in here, on line 10, it says apply reset.css, and then it just goes into all of its content. So the browser only knows, oh, these are the rules you want me to apply? Okay, I'll apply them. So a reset actually needs to go above our style sheet, okay? So that when we save it, we actually get our styles. All right, so you might be asking, well, what's the point of a reset anyway? So way back when I was a kid, no, seriously, browsers usually come with some default settings of like how to style some things. This is so HTML doesn't look so ugly. This looks pretty ugly because there's not a whole lot of styling to it. Our job as developers is to say, no, we've got it from here. We know how to style our pages. So we apply this reset in here and then put our styles on top of it. It's like creating a clean slate to start from. I am going to go back in here and clean these out. Get rid of that because that is not a proper CSS reset. Alright, so special properties. We need to customize our pages to be able to put things left and right, up and down, things like that, and we don't want the normal document flow, which of course, let me remind you, is one element here, one element here, one element here. We'd like to be able to float them across. So let's do that. We can put this red one up here to the right and this green one up to the right of that. Alright, so the first thing the instructions tell us to do is to put all of our divs into a single container. So here I'm going to say, let's call a section, and in that section we're going to give it a class, and that class in this case is clearfix. Okay, and we're going to take all of those divs and place them inside the section, and we'll save that, make sure nothing's broken. Perfect. Yes, you can have class names and CSS not have a class to call. That's totally fine. It's not really great practice, but you can do that. So let's go back over to our style sheet. I'm going to type this in right here. It says clearfix after. Okay, so we're going to say dot clear fix after, and visibility hidden. I do want you to type all of this out. Alright, and so now I want to see what they're doing right here. So they say blue is float left and red is float left. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do that to ours. Check out ours. So we have blue, red, and green. So our blue should be float left, and our red should also be float left, and our green, float left. Save that, and voila, they all come together right across the screen. Okay, obviously this is very simple, and you can do much more extravagant features later on, but get this idea of clearing and floating kind of solidified in your head. Okay, play around with it, really make sure that you grasp it and understand it in practice, not just in theory. And just before you move on from clear, make sure you play with this little code pen right here, uncomment this CSS right here, and watch what happens over here in the browser. All right, I'm down here to the end of the lesson where it says additional resources, optional if you have time and want to learn more. Bullshit. I want you to read and look through every single one of these except for maybe one. A couple reasons we're going to go into this. Number one, each one of these are going to be the resources you go to from now on, like literally from now on. From now till the end of your career when you retire, you will be coming back to these same websites. So I want you to get familiar with them now, because the quicker you do, the better you're going to get at this. And the better you get at this, the quicker you're going to get a job and the more money you're going to be making. So let's go ahead and do that. First one is CSS. Click on that. And it's going to take you to W3 School. All right, W3 School stands for WWW Schools, and it has a ton of different frameworks and languages that relate to the web. So this is a great resource. You really need to go to it. You really need to trust that it's there, and just accept that you have a free library to go to. This page is going to talk about styling HTML with your CSS. It'll cover a little bit more than what you read already and what I've covered. Go ahead, work your way through it. But one of the better things about this particular one is that it's going to give you a summary at the bottom and give you all of these new clever properties that you can use. All right, and if you don't know about them, you can't use them. Next up, we have pseudo class at MDN Docs. MDN Docs is like your go-to resource. I'm on this every single day, literally every day. Because there's so many things in JavaScript that are just so like subtle, and you need a place that documents it so that you can read about it and then apply it later. And every developer uses this. Okay, they are clean and clear about their code, and they have really good documentation about everything. But the cooler thing about this specific site is that it has a list of all the pseudo classes you can use. These things I don't even know about because I've not been doing it long enough to even practice all these. That's the thing, is if you don't know about it, you can't use it. So look through these, click on one, read about it, see what it's about, because the more you know, the more you're going to be able to put these pieces together and work your way through this forest as you learn to code. Next up is learn the difference between block, inline, and inline block. If you haven't found yourself on Stack Overflow yet, you probably haven't been studying yet, because Stack Overflow is where everybody goes to. It's become a running joke where people get stuck in Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow really is like a go-to place for people to ask questions, and then really smart people to answer those questions. And what's cool about this is that when people answer them, you can upvote the answer to say, yeah, that worked for me, or you can downvote them saying that, no, that wasn't a good solution. So when you start seeing these gold stars, you can see that, like, oh, these people really know what they're talking about, and this is a good answer. So what's important about this particular one is that you read the difference between these displays so that you can use it in your CSS. Next up is float from the almighty CSS Tricks. Hands down, the best CSS website there is. Right here is just one single article on float, which I do highly encourage you to read. Moreover, CSS Tricks, if you just clear this out up here and go to csstricks.com, they have videos, they have an almanac, galleries, they even have code snippets and forums where people ask questions. They even offer jobs in CSS, okay? This place is the go-to to find stuff. So over here it's like suggesting Flexbox. So you could go look up Flexbox, or you could go look up Float, right? And it's going to bring up all sorts of things about Float or any other questions you have about CSS. And I bet you, if you Google how to do something, in CSS that is, you're going to end up on this page. So get to know it and use it as often as possible. All right, next up is more about float from MDN. Okay, again, very clear, very helpful website. Go read through this, work your way through it, and just know that like you reading all of this stuff, like all of this what we call documentation, is really important. Not in just like, oh, you learn the knowledge. No, you learn where to find it, and you learn how to break down documentation. And that's probably 90% of your soon-to-be job, is that you come across a problem, you go read about it, and then you try to implement the solution. And so the more you read, the better you're going to get at breaking down this documentation and then applying it for yourself, okay? So don't think like, oh, I'm just reading this and it's boring and whatever. No, like, tell yourself that you are actively learning how to do your job while you're reading this, because I'm not kidding. That's really what it's about. I'm going to get real serious about this. This last one, you must do. You must do. You must do. Okay? I'm going to do the first couple ones as an example, and then I want you to go all the way through the entire course. CSS Diner. You have 32 levels over here, and you have plates up here. And turns out you already have your inspector open. So if you hover over a plate, it tells you exactly where your HTML is. This one right here. Okay? Over here, it says use a CSS selector to select the plate. So I'm going to use a selector and type in plate. I hit enter, and then we move on to the next level, level 2. And now it says select the bento box. So I hover over here, I can say bento, enter, and do that, okay? And now it says select the fancy plate. That one says ID fancy. We could do ID fancy, enter. Perfect. All right. So now you get the idea. I want you to work through all 32 levels of this as a requirement, like absolute requirement. You cannot get around not doing this. You must do it. Please do this. And the last one, I'm going to click, first off, gross, right? Second off, like, why is this on here? And third, like, if you see a website like this, you have to ask yourself, is this still relevant? Is this still useful? And sometimes the answer is no, but sometimes the answer is yes. I've got to say, for instance, the guy that created jQuery posted this way to find the highest and the lowest number in an array, and I used it, and it was from a website that looked just like this. However, take all of this with a grain of salt, because if you scroll all the way to the bottom of this page, you will see that it was posted May 14th of 2014. That's over 14 years ago. So some of this is not going to apply, and there might be better ways to do it, okay? It's okay to read through it, but I'm not so sure that like you have to read through this stuff, all right? So anyway, follow through all of that. Do not take it as optional. Take it as, I need to read this because I need to become really good at coding, okay? Go through it, have fun, and just say, all right, I know it sucks to have to read all of this stuff over and over maybe, and like, I'm never going to finish this, but like, you're also training yourself to do your job. I'm telling you, this is soon to be what your job is like reading about a problem and then implementing the solution. So start practicing it and have fun doing it. All right, until next time, code well. Okay, so yes, it is true. I am wearing a shirt with my dog's face on it. Yes, it was from when she was a puppy, and there's a little bit of red paint on it, but look at this face. And I'll call her over here, but she is feeling a little bit under the weather today. She's been sick for a few days, so I'll call her over, and she won't be all that excited, but oh well. Artemis, come. Come, good girl. Up. Hey, you. Up. No, up. Good girl. Good girl. So this is Artemis, and thanks.